Good early afternoon. We are live. It's the Tuesday show. And you've joined us for the Blue Plate Special. I'm Andy Andrews. We're broadcasting from high atop the skyscraper in Orange Beach, Alabama. We're in the financial district. We're on the second floor here at the wharf. And you're welcome to visit anytime. We have a lot of things to see down here. We have Sand Dollar Lifestyles, which is the area of the wharf that has just unbelievable things. They have everything. And we also have we still have, of course, the infamous escalator statues. If you haven't ever seen an escalator statue, we've got 4 of them here, and they're life-size. They look real. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So if you visit us, definitely get a selfie with the escalator statues, send it out and say you visited. Well, Sandy Atkins, happy Tuesday from El Salvador. It's overcast and 80 degrees here. And you say, I love your show. Thank you. Thank you. One might wonder if there's anything else to do in El Salvador, but I'm glad you like our show. The Pentagon office is open for lunch today, and hey to all the people in the Pentagon that are watching. Martin Simmons, Floyd says, want a haircut, Andy? Want a haircut, Andy? Get a little shaggy in the back there. Dave Huco, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody who's coming in. Shanda Danner. A lot of people join us. We have people here in the studio. Eva Jean Hodge from Elkin, North Carolina. We even have competing hats here. You know, I'm just hoping a fight doesn't break out in the studio. What is this one? I can't see because of the sun. Let's see. Is that a school? It's not a school. Well, then you're the peacemaker. You should probably sit in between the LSU hat and the Alabama hat. Charlie Marlowe, listening from high atop the 5th floor of the Pentagon. Glad you guys are here. Katrina Hansen, good afternoon from Michigan. You know, we've got an odd show today for the people wearing the hats, especially the people wearing the, I got stories about both. And I'm doing this in kind of is a response to last week's podcast. Last week's podcast was about Cracker Barrel and was about the incredible mistake that was made there. So if you want to find out about that, listen to last week's podcast. It's on andyandrews.com. It's on YouTube. And if you're not getting the podcast just into your inbox every Tuesday, go on andyandrews.com and put your email address in the VIP mailing list. And we don't bother you. We just send you the stuff that comes out. So, Dean Ammerman is on a Princess cruise ship headed for Halifax. Wow. Do you know how many cruises I have been on? I have actually been on more than 200 cruises. That's true. I used to work on the cruise ships, and so Virginia Chase joined and just started following you. Good. Well, thank you, Virginia. So you can say you are chasing me now. So anyway, last week, Cracker Barrel. And we talked about that you know, on the podcast, we talked about how it was not, it's not a marketing problem. It's not a decorating problem. It's a culture problem. You know, and so we laid out all the proof about it being a culture problem. Bonnie Nix, Patricia, how are y'all doing? The idea still astounds me. It blows my mind that somebody that high up in an organization, in this case the CEO, who's making $7 million a year, spent $700 million on white paint, a logo change, and I guess trucks and people to haul out all the antiques and paint those walls white and put in more lights. And, it's just astonishing to me. I don't understand what kind of research led to that decision. Because if you just went to any people here in the studio audience or went just out there on Main Street and just said, do you eat at Cracker Barrel as much as you used to? Just do you eat at Cracker Barrel as much as you did 2 years ago? Almost invariably, people will say, no, not as much as I used to. If you ask them why, they'll say, well, the service is kind of bad and the food's just not as good. Okay. Do you remember when you used to have to stand in line at Cracker Barrel? Remember every time you went to Cracker Barrel, you were standing in line. Remember searching for a parking place in the Cracker Barrel parking lot? Well, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to stand in line anymore. And it ain't because of the paint color. It's culture. It's culture. Culture is, indicative in the thinking of the troops, of the everyday guy, the rank and file employee of Cracker Barrel. It's culture. Culture illustrates behavior, discipline, thinking. The culture is in charge of that. And so, I'm especially sensitive to that because I have a company, Creating Measurable Results, where we coach entire companies. And, Cracker Barrel made a $700 million decision that immediately devalued the corporation by 90-something million. It's almost $1 billion mistake. And of course, I would not have charged them that much. But if I could have said, just pay me $200 million, you think they'd have gone for that? Probably not. Because it just seems so, I don't know. It's just crazy. But there's a whole thought out podcast about Cracker Barrel. As we speak, this week's podcast is going out. I'm nervous about it. A little bit embarrassed I had to do it. But the name of the podcast is Roll Tide, Not So Fast, my friend. Yeah. And it was hard doing this and taking this, deconstructing what's going on. Mom Calcat said, I've never caught you live, but you're my favorite author and speaker. Well, thank you. And I'm kind of live now, and I'm assuming you are. So, Caleb Driscoll, hello from Mexico. Okay, so here's the thing about, I'm thinking, like, I'm watching this debacle unfold last year, and I'm seeing all this happen with University of Alabama, and I'm an Alabama fan. I've worked with tons of college football programs, but I'm an Alabama fan. I grew up an Alabama fan. I met Bear Bryant before I was 10 years old. I didn't understand what he said to me. I go, That, that's what it kind of sounded like. But I met him, and I've been an Alabama fan since I was a little kid. I was an Alabama fan in high school. I was an Alabama fan when I went to Auburn for college. Now you may ask, oh, why did you go to Auburn? They were the only place that had a vet school in state, and I was going to be a veterinarian. Actually, I wanted to be a veterinarian and a taxidermist, so I could say either way you get the dog back. Nonetheless, I was going to be a veterinarian, so I went to Auburn. But I was an Alabama fan at Auburn. Never went to a football game. Never said those words that they say, those two words. Never said those. I was an Alabama fan when I was talking to the Alabama team. Alabama fan, private conversation with Nick Saban. And I was an Alabama fan when I was on the practice field at Ohio State and Boise State and on their blue Smurf turf. I've always been an Alabama fan. So it just kills me what's going on right now. And so we have laid it out, and we laid it out in terms of business and business decisions, so that when you watch this, you can see how this, which we all know college football is a business, and so you can see how this parallels where you work and the company that you own, and it's the parallels are astonishing, and so it's something that I held on to for like a year. I wanted to say something, but I felt I felt nervous about it for a couple of reasons. One, I felt nervous about it because I like Alabama. But the other reason I felt nervous about it is because Nick wasn't saying anything. And so I didn't want to appear to be out of line with him, with his thinking on this. And so I knew they still have a house in Tuscaloosa, and he still has a place in the athletic department. He comes and goes as he wishes. And, Cedric Burns still drives Nick around. Cedric Burns, that's a curious name. And they say, you're nodding. You're one of the few Alabama fans that actually knows who Cedric Burns is. Cedric Burns is a guy that started working for the University of Alabama when Bear Bryant was coach. And so he is called a coordinator, an administrator, and a personal assistant to the head coach. And so Cedric Burns, you would see him on the sidelines standing right next to Coach Bryant. And for 17 years, he stood on the sidelines right next to Coach Saban. But what a lot of people don't realize is that he stood on the sidelines with Ray Perkins, with Bill Curry, with Gene Stallings, with Mike DuBose, Francione. He didn't have an opportunity to stand on the sidelines with Mike Price, and I hope he wasn't on the sidelines of anything with Mike Price. We actually had a head coach that was fired before he coached a game. How about that, if you don't remember that? And I know you there in your LSU you're just gloating at all this bad news. I understand that. We'll get to you in a minute. But then he was standing on the sidelines with Mike Shula and Joe Kynes in his interim role then. All right. So 5 years into Saban, I'm at the athletic department one day, and I'm talking to Cedric, and Cedric is, as you might imagine, he has been the ultimate fly on the wall for Alabama football. I mean, just the ultimate. So I like to ask questions. I like to ask good questions because I think good questions get you good answers. And so I asked him, I said, Cedric, if you compare Coach Saban to the other 10 coaches that you have worked with, what differences do you see in the coaches? And his answer, I've never forgotten this answer because I thought it was just very deep, very astute, and something that most of us would never have the opportunity to come to this conclusion. But what he said was, he said, yeah, there's been 11 of them. And he said, you know, they all come with their own ideas. Seems like, you know, some of them like to do things early in the morning. Some of them rather do it in the afternoon after things are gone. He said, you know, they come with different thoughts about practice and different thoughts about the health of the players and different thoughts about dealing with the families. And he said, you know, Mike DuBose wanted to do this, and Franchione, you know, he kind of turned things in a different way when they came, and then Shula had his way of doing stuff, and then he paused and he said, but 3 of them, Coach Bryant, Coach Stallings, and Coach Saban, they exactly alike. That's what he said. They're exactly alike. And if you know Alabama football, you know that those are the only 3 of that bunch that won national championships. And you know, this is in the podcast, but those 3 together won 13 national championships. 13. That's more national championships than Notre Dame has won in 130 years. More national championships than Michigan or USC have won in 130 years. And 3 coaches. And so the one thing that I look at, and I saw that now, culture wasn't really a word when Coach Bryant was coaching, but Coach Bryant described culture every time he talked, because he talked about character and responsibility and doing the right thing and thinking, and all that's just words for culture, and our culture is one term describing all those things. But I finally decided to cut loose, because last week after the Florida State game, Coach Saban came out and said, I've been around Alabama's team a little bit this year, been to practice, and the culture has definitely changed. So I thought, okay, that turns me loose, because I knew he was seeing what I was seeing. I knew, you know, come on. I was just trying to imagine Coach Saban during the Vanderbilt game last year, when Malachi Moore had this meltdown on the field. Malachi Moore with a C on his shoulder pads, a 2-time captain, a permanent captain. He's got his fingerprints, his handprints, his shoe prints in the concrete at Denny Chimes. I mean, this is a permanent captain. And as it became apparent Alabama was going to lose this game, Malachi Moore lost his mind. And one of the defensive coordinator called him off the field, sent in a substitution. Malachi Moore refused. He refused to leave the field, and then took his mouthpiece and threw it across the field. And then, as the official was setting the ball and the teams were coming together to line up for the snap, Malachi Moore ran up from his safety position and kicked the ball. I'm sure I wasn't the only person appalled. And I was just hoping Coach Saban wasn't having a heart attack. But I do know one thing about Coach Saban. Malachi Moore would have been gone. He'd have been gone. I mean, not suspended, gone. And it still bothers me that the new coaching staff, the new head coach, did not, he didn't have anything. No, there's no punishment at all. The coach said in a press conference, he said that he made a mistake and he'll do better. First of all, he didn't make a mistake. A mistake is when you do something and you didn't know it was wrong and you did it. Oh, I made a mistake. A mistake is when you turn right and you find out later you should have turned left. That's a mistake. Malachi Moore made a choice. And a choice is when you know something's wrong. You know that is wrong, and you just do it anyway. I mean, and so it wasn't just Malachi Moore displaying the culture that had taken over at Alabama. It was the coaching staff's response to Malachi Moore that showed the culture that had taken over at Alabama. Now, there's a lot to this, and we do it in a controlled, the podcast is not like this. Right now, I'm just having a conversation with you. Podcast, I'm detailing everything, but right now I'm just talking to my friends, and so I'm getting bent out of shape again just talking about it. One of the things that Coach Saban did, he did what I call competing in a way the competition doesn't know a game is going on. This is what creating measurable results helps businesses do. We coach all the employees, all of them, and we do it at a price they can afford, people can afford, and we help companies compete in ways the competition doesn't know a game is going on. Well, I got LSU and Alabama standing right here next to me, so I'll take you back a few years. And one of the things that I noticed is that you can compete on the football field in a way the competition doesn't know a game is going on if you understand your parameters. Everybody competes the same way. Everybody in every sport, in every industry, people compete the same way. And in football, if you dial in how people say they compete, and you dial in and say, no, I mean really, at the basis of it, you can get down to people saying, well, you compete from the snap to the whistle. And that's true. It's not the truth, but it's true. And it's so true that people stop there. They don't think past that. Compete from the snap to the whistle. This is how they recruit. They recruit for snap to the whistle play. They practice snap to the whistle. When the coaches go in to look at game film, it's already been prepared for them. They're not watching 3 hours. They're watching 14 minutes. They're seeing snap to the whistle, snap to the whistle, snap to the whistle. And so Patricia Garrison, generally I don't give one whit about football, but I know when I listen to you, there will be some nuggets I can apply to my everyday life. Yep, you can, and they're coming, so just hang on here. Because this has to do with your kids. This has to do with your employees. So you look at snap to the whistle. Everybody competes from the snap to the whistle. And you can say, you got to give me everything you got from the snap to the whistle. I want 100% from the snap to the whistle. And that's great advice, except that the coach on the other sideline just said that to his players too. And so, if you're if you're better than they are, the best you can hope to do if you play every single week, week after week, is to beat them every time by a little bit. But if you can figure out how not just to compete from the snap to the whistle, but also compete from the whistle to the next snap while everybody else is just standing around, now you're going to run them off the field. And so how do you compete from the whistle to the next snap? Well, the answer for a business is culture. And of course, the answer for a football team is culture. Now, where does that come into play between the whistle and the next snap? With the officials. I've also worked with the NCAA football officials, and kind of know their makeup, but you know their makeup too, because you watch them, you see them, you see how, you see their ages, you see their color. But what you probably don't know, you know their age, you know their color. They're overwhelmingly white-collar people. They're overwhelmingly white-collar. They're, a football official is not a full-time job like it is with basketball or with baseball. But they're overwhelmingly white-collar. They overwhelmingly have one teenager still left at home, overwhelmingly watch sports television and listen to sports radio, overwhelmingly involved in youth leagues in their home areas. And so when you look at what do they like and what do they don't like, you can kind of generalize. You can form kind of a stereotype or a profile of that person. And you say, what does that kind of person generally like? What kind of thing does that kind of person generally not like? Well, they like respect. They like somebody that hands the ball to them. They don't like somebody, when they get a first down, jumping up and dancing and pointing and, it's a first down, much less the theatrics after a touchdown. But these officials, they hold a huge key to competition. You've listened to enough football games and you've heard enough announcers say these officials can call holding on any play they want to call it on. I mean, who's to say who's holding and not holding in that big mass of humanity that comes together on every play? They can call it on any play they want to call it on. Okay, so if you can call holding on any play you want to call it on, who are you more likely to call it on? People you like or people you don't like? And so how do you create a team that people like? It's a culture. It's a culture. And behavior is a culture. Smiling while you talk is part of a culture. You teach your kids to smile while they talk, they will own the world. I'm telling you. You teach them this one, smiling while they talk, and it will pay off more than a college degree. I'll guarantee you. But with football players, dealing with officials, the snap, dealing with officials even when they're not on the field. College officials watch games during the off season, and they watch complete games. They're not snap to the whistle guys. They're listening to the commentary so they can get to know the players, so they know what's happening in the background. They know, the ones that are, their GPA is 3.9. They know what's going on. They read the papers, they listen to the radio, and so at one point I noticed that when the guys come up at the first of the game and the announcer says, "Let's meet the offensive line," and 5 pictures come up. And so those 5 pictures, these big guys, I noticed that LSU's guys were dressed. Now, I don't know how they do this now, okay? But then I noticed LSU's guys were in T-shirts or jerseys without pads, hat on sideways, a lot of jewelry, and they were looking at the camera like this. And I remember thinking, well, that's pretty intimidating. But who are you intimidating? The people you're wanting to intimidate, they're not watching this. They're down on the field. Who are you intimidating? And I put my imagination to work, and I thought, well, maybe they're intimidating the officials who are watching this during the off season. And maybe one of them just had a talk with his 12-year-old son about wearing his hat that way, and then here's a player that the kid likes dressed like this. All right, so we went the other way with Alabama. And I think to this day, I'm not sure about this year, but the whole time Coach Saban was coach, when we would say, let's see the offensive line, when these guys would come up, I remember the first one I saw was, who's the huge guy? I can't even think of his name right now. But he was like 400 pounds, Who? I can't even hear you. But we all know who it is. Alabama doesn't have many 400-pound players. But anyway, they were dressed in jackets, ties, and the look on their face was this. I mean, they're smiling at the camera. And so then when you look at behavior off the field or on the field, I'm getting notices now, people who think, and I can't believe I can't think of the DJ Fluker. That's exactly right. I've got a picture somewhere of the boys in the locker room. They were like 6 and 8, and Austin Adam had their ankles wrapped with Mark Ingram. But I remember taking them through the locker room one day, and they went, "Gah!" I said, "What?" They said, "Dad, look at this." And we went over to DJ Fluker's locker and picked up one of his cleats. And, my 2 little boys, it was outside this one and outside this one, a size 23. And just a massive cleat. And so, but in any case, the behavior off field, on field, it speaks to the culture, and it speaks to the officials. Nick's very first head coaching job, when he got there, the players were not in Nick Saban shape. So he started having them run stadium steps. Garbage can at the bottom, 2 garbage cans on the way up, 1 garbage can at the top, and running those stadium steps. And about the 3rd day, one of the players said, "This is bull crap." Coach Saban heard him, stopped everything, and said, "Tell you what, go to the locker room, clean out your locker, take your nameplate if you want a souvenir, because you are not coming back. You are off the team." And that was the starting quarterback. If you want to create culture, culture's got to be for everybody. Because when somebody like Malachi Moore, who is a captain, gets away with acting like that, it lowers the standards for everybody. everybody. You know, what can I get away with? What can I do? You know, when you look at the I heard Greg McElroy talk about Ryan Williams, our 17-year-old, or now he's 18, our 18-year-old phenom who drops 3 or 4 balls a game now. I mean, he was touted as like the second coming, and he did. The first 3 or 4 games last year, he was unbelievable. Okay, but then something happened. Culture affects you physically, and he started dropping balls all the rest of the year. Then the first game against Florida State, he dropped 3 that were right in his hands. And this is supposed to be an All-American, right? And Greg McElroy said, well, if you watch the social media he displayed all summer long was with girls and swimming and music and partying. And I immediately thought about my Orange Beach Lady Makos over here. And I thought about the culture they have developed. A national championship, okay? There's 24,000 teams, high school girls fast pitch teams in America. And little Orange Beach, Alabama, #1 team in the nation. 5 state championships in a row. We're a 4A team. And last year we beat 17 7A teams. We went down to Florida in a tournament last year, and Doral and Monteverdi were both in that tournament. Doral was ranked #2 in the nation at the time. Monteverdi was ranked #6. Orange Beach, and they're both 7A teams. And Orange Beach beat them both in the same day. And so I think about the culture that the coach has created, that Coach Alexander has created there, and that those girls have bought into. And when Greg McElroy said that Ryan Williams' social media was all about partying and girls and music and all about that, I immediately thought about, I'm sometimes frustrated by, I'll go on my little girls' Instagram accounts, and they don't post anything. They ain't got anything new, but then LC Robbins, Flora Robbins, she's going into the 11th grade this year. She's already got colleges calling from all over the nation. And LCR posted one off-season Instagram, and it was her working out with a coach and doing unbelievably exhausting things. And I think, here's a high school girl who understands discipline, paying the price, preparing, but there's so many things that behavior thing does, and it's culture. It comes out. It's why you want to raise your kids to a certain standard, that they perform a certain way. Now, I know that my son's friends are not watching this, so I'll tell you something I saw the other day. We're down on the dock, and there are a bunch of guys, a bunch of girls, and one of our adult friends walked down, and he and his wife And as they approached, I stood up, Adam stood up, and one of his friends stood up. The other ones didn't. The other ones said, hey, they were nice, but boy, you immediately notice. I mean, I knew Adam was going to stand up, but I immediately noticed that other kid because I'd not seen him before. But he's on my radar now, and so things like that. And so I tell you the end result, or to me, an end result of not tolerating bad behavior. Two examples are with T.J. Yeldon. T.J. Yeldon went in the first round to somebody, but Alabama had 13 or 14 number one picks at running back year after year. Sometimes we had two in the first round off the same team. And so T.J. Yeldon scored a touchdown in the first quarter and did that. That was it for TJ for the day. He was on the bench rest of the game. This is a blue chip first round draft player, important game, but he's on the bench. We don't do that. That's not who we are. Now, the next year, I saw something happen. I was watching the game at home, and I saw something happen that was so stunning to me that I stopped and I rewound it and got to it, and I took a picture of it on the screen. The officials are not supposed to touch the players, and the players are not supposed to touch the officials. And so T.J. Yeldon was on the ground, and I saw an official lean over and give him a hand and pull him up. And I'm like, oh my God, if that is an example of the officials liking somebody or liking a team. I mean, he just forgot himself for a minute. Okay, so where this ends up is with LSU and Alabama in a national championship game. It's the one that ended up 21-0. And I know you're probably melting right now thinking about that. But it was the one that ended up 21-0 Alabama. And I've always thought about that game because Alabama went the entire game without a penalty. Penalties show culture. Penalties will reveal culture. At least 2/3 of them will. False starts, that reveals culture because it's just a mental error, Holding, that can show culture. Certainly, unsportsmanlike behavior shows culture. But that year, I remember watching Alabama start that game and get through almost that entire game without a single penalty until about 90 seconds to go in the game. Alabama had a false start. And I had been watching that game with some friends, some of whom were from Auburn. And so they showed Nick on the sidelines, and here's a false start, 21-0. Game's almost over, and Nick goes nuts. I mean, he's just going nuts. And I remember, my Auburn buddies going, okay, Nick, it's okay. You got it won. You don't have to act that way. You don't have to, But I didn't say anything. But see, I knew what that was to Nick. Nick teaches these guys that culture is you're not competing against them. You're competing against your potential. So when you compete against other teams, when you compete against other people, you're competing against an average, and you're becoming part of the average. But when you compete against your potential, well, what happens when you get close to your potential? Your potential goes up. And so he knew they had the potential to go that entire game. Nobody's ever played a national championship game and never been penalized. Now, I watched that and I couldn't help but wonder how much of it had to do with off-field behavior, with, the way, on-field behavior too. I wonder how much it had to do with culture affecting the officials. Because that same year, that was the year of the Honey Badger and Jordan Jefferson. Remember, I hate to make you feel bad, but I just imagined those guys walking out on the field, those officials for the national championship game. There's the Honey Badger. Wow, what happened with him this year? Oh yeah, he failed a drug test for synthetic marijuana with 2 of his buddies. And what happened to them? They got a suspension for a half. I think it was against Louisiana Tech. And that same week in the newspapers, 67 naval personnel on the Kitty Hawk failed the same drug test for synthetic marijuana. All 67 of them were dishonorably discharged. Okay, there's just something in the minds of the officials, because they read about that in the paper. Well, there's Jordan Jefferson. What did he do? Oh yeah, he broke curfew, got in a fight in a bar with a Marine, got him on the floor, and kicked him in the head. And he got a suspension for a half. Listen, I remember watching a Penn State game where a 5-star freshman, a blue chip freshman, took a swing pass in this Penn State game from about the 50-yard line and ran untouched to the end zone and flipped into the end zone. Just did a forward flip like Reggie Bush used to do. I can't remember the guy's name because he never played another down at Alabama. Never played another down. Now, you think that kind of stuff won't contribute to behavior with everybody else? It does. And so it makes me wonder about those officials in that national championship game. If they can call holding on any play they want to call it on, they didn't call it at all on Alabama. And don't tell me some of those guys weren't holding. But college football has changed. It's different. The NIL thing has changed the landscape. Now, that doesn't mean that culture is worth less. Culture beats strategy for lunch. Culture beats talent. That's why you can see a team like Troy. Troy in Alabama. Troy. This is not Tide or Tigers. This ain't even Birmingham Southern or South Alabama. This is Troy. And a couple of years ago, Troy beat Nebraska in Nebraska. And then the next year, who did they beat? They beat Texas A&M. Number 6 in the country, Texas A&M, and Troy went into their home stadium and beat them. You remember Appalachian State? Appalachian State, I don't even know if they have a classification, but and beat Michigan in front of 100,000 of their fans. And then they beat somebody else. I can't remember who it was. Maybe they're the ones that beat Texas A&M. Oh, that's right. They beat LSU. It was Troy that beat LSU, wasn't it? Troy beat LSU. Appalachian State Troy beat LSU and Nebraska. And aren't you glad your wife pointed that out to me? She's over here pointing to his hat. It's like, yeah, thanks. And then Appalachian State beat Michigan and then beat Texas A&M when they were ranked number 6. And so there's a curious thing here. If you wonder if culture is doable, I mean, if you know, everybody has one, every company has one, every family has one, every town has a culture. It's just what kind do you have? And I've never seen a culture good enough that it couldn't be improved. Because when people become aware of not just the culture, but why this works as it does, it just pays off hugely, hugely. And so if you look at the culture created, like on Appalachian State, the AD, I can't remember his name right now, it was Charlie is his first name. The AD for Appalachian State obviously knows something about creating culture. Now, here's another one of those things. Georgia State, Charlie Cobb is his name. Georgia State went into Neyland Stadium. Now, Georgia State, this is not Georgia Southern, this ain't Georgia Tech, this ain't Georgia. Georgia State's smaller than Troy, okay? And so Georgia State went into Neyland Stadium on the opening game, 109,000 Tennessee fans, Rocky Top, blast into where you couldn't stand it anymore. And Georgia State beat Tennessee at home at their opening game. But here's the crazy part. They had already printed 200,000 shirts. I don't know. Don't hold me to that number. It was a lot of shirts. Upset Georgia State over Tennessee. They'd already printed them, thousands of them. I mean, as soon as the game was over, they're spreading the shirts out. How does this happen? Well, back in the summer, the athletic director told the assistant athletic director, he said, this first game, when we go in there and beat Tennessee, we need some special way to celebrate. Can you imagine the assistant athletic director, when we go in and beat Tennessee? Yes, when we go in and beat Tennessee. So he had them order the shirts. He put the money out ordering the shirts. Then they went in and beat them. Now, the curious thing is, how would that AD even have the guts? How would he even have the idea that they might go in there and beat Tennessee? He had been the athletic director at Appalachian State. Guy knew what he was doing. He knew how to create culture, and he knew how and when and where culture paid off. Now, one last thing I want to get to about the paying the players. This is just something that has occurred to me, and that is about teams like Mississippi State. You know, Tommy, a guy who's works with shipping, he's a big Mississippi State fan. And my best friend, Kevin Perkins, went to Mississippi State. So Mississippi State, I have realized, and a lot of schools like Mississippi State's never won a national championship. I don't know if they've ever won the SEC, but they've never won a national championship. And so in the past, fan bases are loyal to their teams, and those players, that's their players, and they're watching them grow up, and they're proud of them no matter what. And you know, if there's a freshman at Mississippi State that plays incredible, that does something, everybody at Mississippi State is going, man, what is he going to be like as a senior? What is this kid going to be like as a senior? But now, when a team like Mississippi State watches a freshman do something incredible, they got to be thinking, I wonder where he's going to play next year. Because it's nothing because the teams like Mississippi State and Kentucky, they're just farm teams. They're farm teams for the big guys. I read about one player last night who is at his 6th school. And I got to say, I'm just tired. I'm tired of hearing the broadcasters talk about this so-and-so. Last year he had 1,100 yards with Miami. And his freshman year, he had 700 yards at Kentucky. So let's see what he does here at Notre Dame. I used to not criticize college players at all because I thought these are kids, these are students, and a few of them will go to the pros, but these are kids, and so I'm not gonna criticize a kid and get on too crazy about that. But now there is high school and there is pro. Jalen Milroe last year for Alabama was making $300,000 a game. A game. Arch Manning is he a sophomore? I think he's a sophomore. He redshirted and then he's a sophomore. So $440,000 a game. Now, I say there's high school and there's pro, but that's going away too. There's a kid at Thompson High School in just outside of Birmingham that was offered $700,000 to go play his senior year in high school at some school in California. Now, fortunately, somebody smart or somebody wise got up with him, or maybe it was his parents, but somebody said, buddy, don't do this. You've got a great future ahead of you. You don't need to waste your whole future on $700,000. And so you just keep your nose to the grindstone, keep doing the right thing, and your time's coming. So it's an amazing thing. We're paying them now, and yet culture is still the defining thing. I mean, I guess Alabama's paying their players about as much as anybody else, but when the standards relax, the culture declines, and I mean, look at UCLA under Wooden. What did they win? 7 national championships in a row? One time? In a row? And he was perfectly willing to kick Bill Walton off the team. Bill Walton said, I think I have a right to grow a beard. And John Wooden said, you do. He said, so I can have a beard? He said, you can. We'll miss you. Bear Bryant kicked Joe Namath and Kenny Stabler off the team. Kenny told me one time, he said when he kicked him off the team, he said, I came home, and he said, I didn't know what was going on. And he said, practice was happening, I'm off the team. He said, and I got a telegram from Joe Namath, who was playing with the Jets at the time, and the telegram had 3 words on it. It said, "He means it." So, there's our conversation for today. Lasted a little longer than I thought it would, maybe a little longer than it should. But I really would appreciate you guys checking out the podcast that's coming out right now, and pass it around. Pass it around. Let families know what culture does. Let companies know what culture does. Wanda Parsons, happy Tuesday to you. We'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye.